The morgue is where science meets final silence. It's a space designed for logic, medicine, and respect for those who have passed. But those who work there after the sun goes down know that absolute silence doesn't exist. They know that bodies tell stories, and that sometimes death is only the beginning of something we cannot explain. Tonight, we step into the frozen hallways and cold storage units to hear 3 tallies that defy reason. Get ready, because after this, the chill you feel won't just be from the air conditioning. Working at a forensic morgue isn't like they show in the movies. There's no dramatic music, just the constant hum of compressors and the sharp smell of formaldehyde and cold metal. My shift begins at 11 p.m. I'm in charge of receiving the night intakes and ensuring everybody is properly labeled before the coroners arrive in the morning. Thursday night was particularly quiet. There were only 3 bodies in the cold storage units. Around 2 a.m., while I was filling out reports at the front desk, I heard a sharp metallic sound. Clack. It was the sound of a latch releasing. I looked up and peered toward the storage hallway through the security glass. The door to Unit 14 was open just a few inches. It seemed strange, as I had personally checked the locks at the start of my shift. I walked toward it, feeling the air grow colder with every step. I pushed the heavy steel door shut and made sure the latch clicked firmly. Thermal adjustment, I thought. Sometimes pressure changes make old doors give way. I went back to my seat, but 10 minutes later the sound repeated. Clack. I looked at the security monitor pointing directly at that hallway. In the grainy black and white image, I saw the door to Unit 14 slowly swing open again, as if something from the inside were pushing with a minimal but constant force. But what made my heart stop wasn't the door. It was seeing the unit's motion sensor. The red light began to blink, indicating activity inside the sealed refrigerator. I stared at the monitor, eyes fixed on that blinking red light. Protocol said I should report to security, but curiosity, or perhaps the fear that a body wasn't truly dead, forced me to act. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the units. The hum of the refrigerators seemed to have risen in pitch, turning into an electric wail. I reached Unit 14. The door was open again, letting out a glacial mist that swirled around my feet. With my heart pounding in my chest, I gripped the handle and pulled the tray out with force. It slid on its rails with a metallic screech. The body, there was a young man found in the river that afternoon. He was pale, rigid, and covered by a white sheet. There was no one else. The unit was empty except for the body. I sighed in relief, thinking the motion sensor had simply malfunctioned due to the cold. But just as I was about to push the tray back in, I noticed something on the sheet. There were finger marks, not on top, but from underneath, as if invisible hands were gripping the fabric from the corpse's chest. Suddenly, the hallway motion sensor right behind me triggered. I spun around quickly, but there was nothing but darkness. When I looked back at the tray, the sheet was no longer on the body. It was bunched up at the feet, and the corpse had its mouth open in an impossible position, as if screaming in silence. On the inside of the steel door, I saw something that made me recoil. A series of fresh scratches in the metal. I didn't run, but I had chained that door shut and locked myself in the office with all the lights on. Every time I hear the clack from Unit 14, I don't get up. I simply turn up the volume on my radio and pray that whatever is trying to get out never learns how to open my office door. My job as a pathology assistant involves a lot of administration. One of my tasks is transcribing the recordings that coroners leave on their dictaphones during night autopsies. It's mechanical work. I listen to descriptions of organs, weights, and measurements while the scalpel does its job in the background. You get used to the sound of flesh, but you never get used to what I heard last Tuesday. Dr. Aranda had left a tape recorded at 3:15 a.m. regarding a Jane Doe case, a man found in an abandoned building with no obvious signs of violence. I put on my headphones, adjusted the volume, and hit play. The doctor's voice sounded tired, with the metallic echo of the dissection room. Starting external exam, the recording said, "Subject presents an unusually low temperature, even for the estimated post-mortem interval." Suddenly, between the doctor's words, I heard a strange noise, a hiss. I thought it was static from an old tape. The doctor continued, proceeding with the Y-shaped incision. Right at that moment, a voice that wasn't Dr. Aranda's filtered into the audio. It was a hoarse whisper so close to the microphone that I could hear the click of lips opening. The voice clearly said, "I can still feel that." I ripped the headphones off, my heart racing. I checked the office. I was alone. I put the headset back on and rewound the tape, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. But it was there. The doctor would ask a technical question aloud, as he usually does to organize his thoughts, and the voice on the tape would answer him with increasing clarity. I forced myself to keep listening. On the recording, the doctor continued working with total normalcy, describing the organs with his characteristic professional detachment. He didn't seem to notice anything strange, which made the audio far more terrifying for me, the only one who could hear what was happening in the background. Beginning examination of the thoracic cavity, the doctor said. "Don't cut so deep," the second voice whispered immediately after. The doctor carried on unfazed, mentioning the state of the ribs. Then, the sound of the tape changed. A long hiss followed, and the whispering voice reappeared, but this time it wasn't commenting on the autopsy. It was reciting numbers: 3, 14, 22. I froze as I realized those were the intake dates of the other bodies in the morgue that night. The recording ended with the doctor saying, "Examination finalized at 4:15 a.m. All in order." Just before the silence filled my headphones, the other voice uttered one last phrase. So clear, it felt like someone was standing right behind my chair, telling me forgot to close my eyes. I turned off the equipment with trembling hands. I left the office and walked toward the autopsy room. The doctor had already gone home, leaving everything clean and the report on the table. The body was already back in its unit. When I approached the refrigerator to verify everything was closed, I noticed the handwritten report the doctor had left. In the final observations section, he had written, "Procedure went without incident," though I had the strange feeling that the dictaphone was picking up more noise than usual. I still do the transcriptions every night, but now I always leave one earbud out, just to make sure the voice I hear stays trapped only on the tape. In the morgue, order is sacred. Everybody has a number, a unit, and a file. My final task before handing over my shift is to perform the inventory, walk through the refrigerator hallway, and count the occupied doors to ensure they match the intake log. It's a 5-minute procedure I've done hundreds of times. Last night, the log indicated we had 12 occupants. I began my count as I walked down the metal hallway. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12. Everything seemed normal. However, upon reaching the end of the hall and turning back toward the office, my eyes caught Unit 20. The small LED light above the door was on, indicating weight on the tray. I frowned. I rechecked the logbook. Unit 20 was supposed to be empty. There was no file corresponding to that number. I thought perhaps one of the orderlies had forgotten to update the book. I walked to the unit and, following protocol, opened it to verify who was inside and check their tag. The tray slid out smoothly. It was empty. There was no one, no sheets, no sign it had been used. Sensor failure, I concluded. I closed the door and counted again just to be sure. 1, 2, 3. And as I reached the end of the hall, the light for Unit 20 flickered on again. This time, the sensor didn't just indicate presence. The digital display on the door showed the exact weight, 74 kilograms. Someone, or something, had just laid down on the tray the exact second I closed the door. I stood paralyzed, staring at the figure on the screen. 74 kilograms. It wasn't a random system error. It was too specific a weight. With my pulse quickening, I gripped the handle of Unit 20 again. I pulled it hard, hoping to find someone or discover a mechanical flaw, but the tray came out completely empty. The metal gleamed under the white room lights, frozen and deserted. At that moment, the morgue silence was broken by a subtle but terrifying sound. It was the creak of the tray's metal in front of me, bending slightly downward, as if someone had just sat on the very edge, just inches from where I stood. The digital display changed again. The weight dropped to 20 kilograms, as if the invisible body had leaned forward, moving closer to me. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the empty tray. I let it slide back in on its own and closed the door. The sensor returned to 0 kilograms. I thought it was over. But as I looked down the rest of the hallway, the LED lights on the units began to light up one after another in a chain. 19, 18, 17, 16. The weight was transferring from one unit to the next, moving toward the exit, right where I had to pass. There were no noises, no shadows, no screams. Only the rhythmic sound of weight sensors activating and deactivating as I passed, as if an invisible crowd were walking beside me, escorting me to the door. When I reached the office, I closed the logbook without noting the error. I said nothing to my relief shift. I wouldn't know how to explain that even though the book said 12, I felt I was surrounded by dozens of presences. Now, every time I do the inventory, I avoid looking at the weight displays. I prefer to believe the sensors are failing rather than accept that in this place, the dead don't always stay where we leave them. At the end of the night, the lights go out and the logs are closed, but the doubts remain. They say energy is never destroyed, only transformed, and perhaps in the autopsy rooms, that energy refuses to fully leave. If you've ever felt an unexplainable presence or a sudden chill where there shouldn't be one, tell me about your experience in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to keep exploring the darkest corners of reality. Be careful with the whispers in the dark, and try to rest in peace if you can.